26-year-olds are not supposed to die because they don't have insulin. But without insurance, Alex Smith couldn't afford the $1,300 a month to control his diabetes. So he tried rationing his insulin, empty vials found near his body.
We had the life-saving medication in the refrigerator, and we gave it to our child. Yes, we broke the law.
We have more people rationing insulin than ever before. We don't know how many people with type 1 diabetes have died because they can't get their insulin, but we know the number is going up.
In 2015, 30.3 million Americans, or 9.4% of the population, had diabetes. Approximately 1.25 million American children and adults have type 1 diabetes. 1.5 million Americans are diagnosed with diabetes every year. Diabetes remains the 7th leading cause of death in the United States. Diabetes is a disease that occurs when your blood glucose, also called blood sugar, is too high. Blood glucose is your main source of energy and comes from the food you eat. In most people's body, insulin regularly helps glucose from food get into your cells to be used for energy. Although in diabetic patients, insulin does not work the way it should. In patients with type 1 diabetes, their body does not make insulin, while in patients with type 2 diabetes, their body does not make insulin or use insulin well. Type 1 diabetes is usually diagnosed in children and young adults, although it can appear at any age. People with type 1 diabetes need to take insulin every day to stay alive. Referring back to the first patient who was treated with insulin, it only cost $3 Canadian. Since then, the price has only been increasing. From 2002 to 2013, the price has nearly tripled. No help to the 7 million people that need the drug to survive. In 2016, type 1 diabetics paid an average of $5,705 for insulin, according to the Healthcare Cost Institute. Only 3 companies control 90% of the global insulin market. They more or less hold a monopoly there and can set prices as they wish. The price for one vial of Eli Lilly's Humalog surged from $35 in 2001 to $234 in 2015. From 2013 to this year, Novo Nordisk Novolog jumped from $289 to $540, and Sanofi from $244 to $431, according to a committee letter. Simon Taylor, University of Maryland School of Medicine diabetes researcher, says type 1 diabetics without adequate insurance coverage are vulnerable to price increases because they can't live without the drug. Since the 1990s, the cost of insulin has increased over 1,200%. 1 of every 4 patients with type 1 diabetes has to ration their insulin due to cost. Many have died. To get some first-hand answers from diabetics, I turned to Rebecca Mall, a pastor at Wake Forest Presbyterian Church, who has had diabetes for over 35 years. What are some changes that you've seen firsthand in diabetic technology since your diagnosis?
There were no blood glucose monitors. You had to go into the doctor. It would be checked every quarter of the year, and that was it. Mm-hmm. So you would have one finger stick that would tell you how you were doing. So that's kind of antiquated. There were no multiple shots when I was first diagnosed, but my doctor was very much on the edge and wanted me to take care of myself. So he started me on multiple shots. I qualified for one of the first blood glucose monitoring devices ever, and in '85, and that resulted in me having some sense of control over the disease. Multiple shots at that time were 2 to 3 shots a day, and now shots I take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 shots a day, and occasionally 7, but not very often.
Along with Rebecca Mall, I turned to Samantha Kazar and Melinda Keene to get some more first-hand answers.
Okay,
Libra.
Yeah,
Definitely.
the Libra that I have, that was not a thing. I think a continuous glucose monitor is kind of new too. The Dexcom, I don't think
They didn't have
was a
Dexcoms.
machine when I was first diagnosed.
They were kind of
pod
hinting at it. The pod has changed.
has changed a lot. It used to be bigger. It was like thicker and it was wider, which is like a big difference.
They just keep honing the technology to make it a little bit smaller.
Smaller, yeah. The new pod is a little bit smaller than this.
And it still holds the same
It
amount.
still holds the same amount.
Cool.
See?
And the new PDM that goes with that is
It's Bluetooth. So everything, and it's touchscreen. So, yeah, it's just all like, what can I do to make it better and faster? And
As they were saying, The technology of diabetics seemed to be getting better in speed and in size, but the price of insulin seemed to be getting worse.
$15 a vial, that's before insurance, and now it's $1,200 for 4 insulin pens that it takes, so significant.
Oh, it's way, way up.
Okay, but I saw a doctor who had a grant with a hospital that made insulin really cheap. It was like 12 vials for like
$7.
$7.
Yeah, and that was, he worked through Wake
Med.
Med. And so then when he moved and went in with Duke, then we noticed the real,
The
price
real
of,
price.
the
We were
real
being,
price
like,
of
blindsided.
insulin. But it's still, like, there's been times where her deductible was not met on the insurance, and one vial was like almost $300.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
really expensive.
unless you have insurance, I mean, it's ridiculous because it's a,
Yeah.
life or death kind of
Oh yeah,
drug.
you need it, so it's, I
But-
don't know.
Yeah.
Luckily, Samantha and Rebecca are able to have health insurance that helps with the cost of insulin. What health benefits does the church provide you with?
I have very good medical coverage, which is tied in with my retirement, so I can't really separate them. It's just considered my health insurance policies, and it's with the denomination, and they do take care of the preachers. It's a great program. But the cost of the deductible is amazing, and the insurance company is now becoming more selective in what medications they will approve. And so otherwise you can get the latest and the greatest, but you do get pretty good coverage.
How does insurance play a factor in Samantha's medical bills?
We're dealing
Huge.
with this right now.
Yeah. Well, she had insurance with her dad for a long while, and so it was always, we had to work to meet the deductible. So we would pay out of pocket for a lot of the stuff.
Pods are really expensive.
Pods are very expensive if you
Yeah.
don't have insurance. I mean, like $1,200 for 3 months, expensive.
I also asked them to imagine what life would be like without insurance, and their answers were pretty obvious.
Oh, I'd be dead. That's pretty strong, isn't it? No. Well, I don't think I'd be nearly as healthy as I am now. And yeah, there'd be a possibility that I would not be able to afford it. And for instance, my meter here, I would not have qualified to even have it. I'd be a sick woman or dead.
And I think that's wild because, like, obviously not everyone has insurance.
Yeah.
So you can't have an insulin pump, a Libra, if you don't have.
Yeah. I knew
Insurance is
someone who
wild.
did not have insurance for their job, and so they didn't have a pump because you couldn't afford it.
I know you just have to do shots.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
now because we switched over insurance companies, there's this whole. It's very hard to get the supplies lined up.
Because we're borrowing.
It's just been like jumping through hoops and trying to please this
And insurance companies are not that. They're not nice.
They're not very customer service oriented, and they're not in the least bit in any kind of hurry.
What changes do you believe need to be made to the price of insulin and diabetic products?
Learned about healthcare in the United States. I was listening to a pharmaceutical guy who was being asked, why does this particular drug at $2.50 a bottle now cost like $2,000?
Yeah.
And he said, because of their research, that is what the market will afford. Meaning that's how much money they can get out of people.
Yeah.
And to put people in relationship to money and profit for pharmaceuticals puts our greatest vulnerabilities in a bad situation. I don't know what people who are unemployed, who are living in poverty, are able to do. They don't have good health care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what makes government good is how we treat the most vulnerable citizens of our country. And the most vulnerable citizens of our country are getting more and more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's criminal.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
I think the companies that make insulin need to stop gouging the public, because I think that's basically what they've done is I don't believe that it's more expensive to manufacture insulin. I just think they're thinking, this is what people have, so we're gonna, drive the prices up.
I think another thing that is a factor is like more and more doctors are doing like insulin treatment options for type 2, and since the like unhealthiness of the United States and like the average person, a lot of people have type 2 diabetes, and I think by jacking with prices it's like, hey, you could not have, because it's like a lifestyle thing. But for us, where it's not a lifestyle thing, we were just graced by God with this lovely thing. It like you can't help it. I don't know. I think that plays a factor. But yeah, I don't understand it because it's not something that we could live without.
After getting 2 perspectives from diabetics, I decided to go to Wake Med and get a perspective from an endocrinologist.
I'm Dr. Hillary Lockemer, and I'm a pediatric endocrinologist at Wake Med.
Dr. Lockemer saw many of the changes in the diabetic products as Samantha and Mr. Becca did. How has the price of insulin changed?
So we know that the cost of insulin has been increasing a lot, and when you look at prices back in the early 2000s, I think a lot of the estimates, depending on the brand, are about 500 to 600% increase in the cost of insulin during that time. More recently, it looks like that most insulins are increasing by about 10% every year for the last 5 or 6 years, which is a pretty big increase.
Then I asked Dr. Lockemer some deeper questions on how the price of insulin can affect those who aren't insured. So, what effect does the price of insulin and other diabetic products have on those who are the lower class or don't have the insurance provided?
Bigger challenge seems to actually be with our patients who have certain commercial insurances, especially if they have a really high deductible plan, because they kind of get caught in the middle. Some of these things might technically be covered, but yet these patients and their families are having to pay sometimes $5,000 out of pocket before they can actually get their copay, which might still be $150 to $250 per month just for insulin. And then it can be similar type costs for continuous glucose monitor supplies and similar for insulin pump supplies. So some families, even with insurance, can be paying $500 to $700 per month just for all of this tools and technology. And then, if someone doesn't have any insurance, then they're going to be paying out-of-pocket costs for those, and most people, they just can't afford the insulin. Even on using things like GoodRx or using coupons, things like that, usually the cheapest that you can get insulin or some of these supplies is going to be about $50 to $100 per month. So this is why we're seeing a lot of individuals, unfortunately, especially young adults, as they lose their parents' insurance, that they have to ration their insulin and their supplies, and they're not able to take this life-sustaining medication, and we're unfortunately seeing a lot more effects of people dying because of that.
Mm-hmm. What is your thought on how pharmaceutical companies determine the cost of medication like insulin?
So we know that there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but part of the challenge is that there isn't a lot of transparency from insurance companies as to how they make those determinations. One of the things is we know that insulin is always going to be a more expensive medication compared to something that's maybe a pill. Because it's what we call a recombinant medication, so basically they're manufacturing a lab version of the human molecule insulin, it is just going to take a lot more money and a lot more time, and it's a much more complex medication to make compared to some of the others that are just in a pill form. So it is always going to be more expensive, but there are other factors that we don't completely understand why it's getting more expensive. The packaging hasn't changed in a long time, and so it's not like that has made any difference. And with both type 1 and type 2 diabetes rates increasing across the world, there is actually more demand, so you would think that that would kind of offset some of the costs. So we really have no idea.
Yeah. So going off of that, what changes do you believe need to be made to the price of insulin and other diabetic products?
Yeah, so I think definitely we need better transparency on why are these products costing the amount that they cost, and then trying to find ways to reduce those costs. There have been, even from the Endocrine Society, kind of suggestions that using some of the older insulins, which are cheaper, it should be a good alternative for people who can't afford the medications. The problem is that we know that, one, it's not standard of care, and two, you can't get as good of control with those types of insulins, and so then it's just going to lead to higher healthcare costs down the line when those individuals start to have more complications from diabetes. So I think that really the things that like the JDRF president and CEO have been doing, going and meeting with Congress and urging them to put caps and limits on insulin pricing, and then encouraging insurance companies to actually cover the different insulins and pumps and CGMs and technology as it continues to advance for people, and giving them that freedom of choice of what therapy really is going to work best for them. That's when we're going to get people who actually are going to get better diabetes control, and then we're going to be able to prevent complications, and then we're really going to be able to cut healthcare costs that way. Mm-hmm. So I think really it needs to just be a lot of pressure on the individuals that are making those decisions, because especially with type 1 diabetes, this is a life-sustaining medication, and these individuals had no choice in getting type 1 diabetes. Yeah. And so until we can find a cure, just, making sure that they can just continue to live the normal, healthy lives that they should be allowed to live.
Yeah. Thank you so much. The amount of people being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes is increasing daily, along with the price of insulin. There are people who are lucky and have insurance to help with the cost of insulin, but those who don't have to suffer. According to Type 1 International, the average out-of-pocket monthly diabetes cost is $360 in the United States. This amount can be detrimental to some. Compared to any other drug, the Journal of American Medical Association says it has increased the fastest. Things need to change, and you can help. JDRF is leading the fight against type 1 diabetes by funding research, advocating for policies that accelerate access to new therapies, and providing a support network for millions of people around the world impacted by type 1 diabetes. You can help by donating on the website or participating in their many fundraising events. Diabetes remains the 7th leading cause of death, but we can change that. You can change that.